Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome along to Celtic State of Mind. As you can see, it's not Paul John Dykes hosting today, it is myself, Colin Watt, and I'm delighted to be joined, as always, on a Thursday afternoon by Mr. John Paul Mason. How are you doing today, mate?
Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, looking forward to dissecting all things Celtic, which there's much to dissect, I guess.
I mean, you could say it's been a quiet 24 hours, but that would be a complete lie. There's been so much going on in the world of Celtic, and that is why this bulletin is so influential in the Celtic fans' perspective, because we can take a look at what's happened and give a fan's view. So the main talking point of today really is Peter Lawwell's video as such. I don't even know if it's an apology video, what it is. It was put together by Celtic's media team. And if you take a look at it, you can see it's been heavily edited. I would really like to know how long the actual interview was with him. But just to give a quick overview of what the video was, basically, it starts off with an apology. In hindsight, he says, in hindsight, he decides that the trip was a bad idea and he apologises to the fans. From that point onwards, he's then asked by Jerry McCulloch, do you regret going? And the answer was that no, they wanted to go because they've seen it as something that they'd done before, something that was influential in their performances, and something that they thought would be of a professional benefit to them. They also then was asked about the accusations from the media. Peter Lawwell responded back saying that they were unfair, but he does understand the questions as to why they went. He then went on to plug Celtic's involvement in the charity aspect of COVID-19, talking about the money that's been donated through the foundation. I think the number that he quoted was around 1 million. And he finished with something which I thought was, it was almost like a rallying cry from him, that there would be challenges ahead, that we must come together and we must continue to fight, and that they would continue to fight on the park and off the park. It's now had over 100,000 views in the last 19 hours. It's been a video that's went right across social media. It's went right across the fan bases, not just of Celtic, but of Scottish football. JP, what's your take from it? It was 4 minutes 53 seconds of probably the most I've heard from Peter Lawwell in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it popped up on my phone yesterday afternoon, and I just saw Lawwell's face staring back to me. I think I went to YouTube. I was probably checking something about ACSOM, really, and the first thing that popped up was Peter Lawwell's face, and I was like, wait a minute, what's this? And I'm not using social media at the moment, so I wasn't aware of anything about it at all until maybe a couple of hours after it was broadcast. So I saw the face and I was like, oh, he's finally come out and said something. So I watched it. And it just reminded me of something from, I don't know, you might not remember this, but there was a TV programme called Brass Eye that mocked like political affairs. It was Chris Morris and sort of, he did the Day-to-Day as well. And the Day-to-Day is where Alan Partridge started and everything like that. So It kind of reminded me of something from that, like this, almost like a sort of, this is what would happen if this did happen, and here's what it would sound like. But it was the actual real thing, you know what I mean? It was actually Peter Lawwell talking and expressing, regret and sort of reluctantly sort of holding his hands up, really only after a couple of days of silence and everybody screaming, going, why has nothing been said? I can only imagine the pelting that have been taken on social media in the last couple of days. I'm glad I've avoided it. But it's just weird. I don't know. It's just a weird scenario to have your chief executive come out and say that, and have to say that. Have to be in the position to be able to put a statement out like that. And it's just like, how have we got to this? I know this season is an absolute horror show, but like to get to this point is just it's we've found another we've found another sort of thing to go wrong, that everybody thought this was a potential, this could happen, but for it to actually happen and unravel, and then the team on Monday was just like, oh my God, like how. Yeah. That's what I've got in Peter Lawwell's statement.
You're literally at the point now, if you don't laugh, you'll cry with the way that things are going this season. If someone had said to you at the start of August that and the position we'd be in January would be this, and we'd be waiting for a statement to come out from Peter Lawwell to say sorry for a trip and then go on and defend it, it's not something you can imagine at the start of the season. Jungle Lion makes a great point here. 4 minutes of speaking, he said nothing. He did speak, obviously, it wasn't 4 minutes of silence, but I think the point here is it was 4 minutes of things that we'd already heard before. There was absolutely nothing new came out of what Peter Lawwell had said. It had been the sort of agenda they'd been trying to make towards the press. We saw John Kennedy in his press conference at the weekend, and he said the exact same things as what Peter Lawwell is saying. So he's right, there's absolutely nothing new that came out of Peter Lawwell, and I think that's what fans were looking for. They were looking for them to come out and say something that we hadn't heard before. We were looking for a genuine apology.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's just a really, really weird scenario to have to come out and do that. And I think I can't remember if he said anything about why they took Julian. Was that even pressed?
Yeah, I think we had a bit of technical difficulties there. Maybe the ACSOM sniper that people have been talking about in the chat tried to take us out. No, but what I was saying there just before we were interrupted is basically it's nothing that we hadn't heard before. And I think Celtic fans were really genuinely looking for a heartfelt apology. And I think everyone's still waiting on the outcome of that we've been told is due to come in January.
Yeah, which I saw that despite not being on social media, I did hear that John Paul Taylor had responded to someone's comment saying, you know, we were promised a review and we should get one, you know. So he's an employee of Celtic. So if he's actually coming out and saying that he expects that as a fan as well, obviously the guy's a fan, there's no doubt in that. So, you know, he's expecting that review as well. I don't really know how that review will be presented to the Celtic support, because it's not as if we're going to get to read minutes of a review of a meeting that's taken place. It's just going to be a case of coming out going, basically get behind the manager. You know, we've been unfortunate, but the unfortunate part is that it's of our own doing. Like we didn't the last thing that we needed to do was to have someone get coronavirus. And yes, I know that, okay, they say it could have happened here. It didn't happen here. It happened mucking around, going to Dubai, you know, and see the fact that it's Dubai, you know, it's just my personal opinion, but Dubai is basically Cumbernauld with a budget, you know, it's just like this fake place. It's a fake place where people with, you know, shed loads of cash go to show off the fact that they've got shed loads of cash. And I can't help but think that Celtic have basically fallen into line with that kind of thinking, you know. The type of guys that you get in hotels in Dubai, I wouldn't want to have a glass of water with them, never mind a pint. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like Celtic are going to put themselves in that. The only club, I think, that have travelled abroad, and amidst all this, by the way, it's not as if there was loads of other teams going out and doing it as well. We're the only club that did it. It's just like we're just asking for trouble, you know. So, aye.
It was quite interesting to see today that Spartak Moscow are actually heading off to Dubai for a winter-summer training camp.
Oh,
clearly they've not seen the whole debacle that's came out from Celtic. Surely Jordan Larsson's been speaking to his dad and he's heard about it. But no, it's incredible. But yeah, we were the only team that actually went away on a training camp. And if anybody follows Old Firm Facts on Twitter, he put a fantastic article up talking about where all the teams in England and Scotland went on their training camp. And basically it was a parody of the fact that Celtic went away. And we have got ourselves into this situation where we are a bit of a laughingstock because of this. Everybody had an idea of what was going to happen. This hasn't come as a surprise to anybody. But what has come as a surprise to me is that Peter Lawwell has actually spoken. This is the first we've seen Peter Lawwell. The
Yeah.
last time it was a statement on the club's website, and that was chastised by the fans, and rightly so. And now he's actually sat down and had an interview, but yet he's still running from Paul John Dykes. That interview is still not gone ahead. We'd love to see it here on A Celtic State of Mind, just as much as we'd love to see everyone who's getting involved in the comments today. JP, we've had a couple of people now saying that you've got a bit of the Jurgen Klopp about you today. Is that is this you making the move from the Celtic manager's job?
Yeah, I'm going to be a pound shop Jurgen Klopp. They can get me in on a cheap budget, and I'll I'll go for it. I didn't actually. My friend Brendan gets called Jurgen Klopp a lot. In fact, he got stopped in the street when we were out one night, and we got stopped in Sauchiehall Street by this guy that was steaming, and he was like, it's Jurgen Klopp, and he was like arm round Brendan and that. Brendan's just like, oh god. And yeah, I'll take it. I've actually met Jurgen Klopp. I've got a picture with him, so somebody could probably photo swap me.
Fantastic. But yeah, this is clearly the main talking point from today. I mean, as I said, over 100,000 people have now watched this video in the last 19 hours. Just some of the comments coming through there. You even grabbed his chin like Jurgen. You are certainly setting yourself up as a pound shop Jurgen Klopp.
Aye, well, we'll run with it. I didn't have the comments switched on until you said. I put the comments. Oh, right, okay.
But obviously, there's actually been more to talk about over the last 24 hours, which sums up the way Celtic's season's going. We will take a look ahead to the game at the weekend against Livingston. Livingston, whose game last night against Aberdeen was actually called off on an artificial surface, which is absolutely incredible. Called off for being waterlogged. I seen a great comment from Jamie Langfield saying that he was delighted that the game was called off because that game could have turned into a mud bath, which I thought was that was a great bit of patter. We'll take a look at some of the ins and outs for Celtic in the January window. There's been rumours in the newspapers today of Shane Duffy's departure. Apparently he has been linked with a move to Nottingham Forest. We're also now 2 weeks into the transfer window, and there is still no rumours of players being linked to Celtic. Some of the players that were previously linked have now went on to sign for other clubs. Is that a sign of the transfer strategy at Celtic? And obviously we'll be looking at your comments coming in. But starting off with another talking point which has came up, and I think one that we can probably quickly cover is the under-18s. It's came out today from Stephen McGowan in the Daily Mail that the under-18s have been put on furlough for the next couple of weeks, in line with the fact that the Scottish Government and the SFA have shut down football from below the championship level. It seems as though the players are being paid the 80% furlough by the government and then 20% topped up by the club. I think this is something that's happened before, but again, it just seems to be a story that has put a bad light on Celtic, and it's probably come at a bad time considering all the other PR stuff that's going on at the moment.
I mean, we certainly don't need to look for any negative press. I mean, we're just basically handing it to them on a plate. But yeah, in regards to the furlough, it just kind of shows you, I guess, you know, these guys. I don't obviously who knows. Are they? If you're an under-18 footballer, I mean, is that all you do, or can you work and also be a footballer at under-18 level? I'm ignorant to that. What do you think?
I'm unsure. We did have Amy Canavan on the show yesterday, who is the media manager from Bonnie Rig Rose, and obviously they have now been their football's now suspended indefinitely. They say it's 3 weeks, but let's be honest, there's never going to be 3 weeks. And the point that we were discussing off air yesterday was these guys will have full-time jobs. So if you turn up to your employer and say, oh, by the way, I caught this illness playing against Bonnie Rig at the weekend, and then you have to take 2 weeks off, or you have to isolate for 2 weeks, your employer's not going to be happy with that. But from my opinion, I think the under-18s here, once you turn 16, you would then be transferred onto a sort of first full-time contract. And we're not talking about big money. As the comments are saying coming in, a lot of these guys are probably still at school and at college as well.
Yeah.
So to take that risk factor away, I think is probably a good idea. Could Celtic have afforded to pay the 100% wage? I think, of course, they could. But they seem to be utilising this project that's out there from the government. And at a time when the PR surrounding Celtic isn't great, it's probably a news story that he didn't want to break. If this was a happy time and everything was all positive in the news, I don't think a lot of people would have mentioned it. But the fact that they've just spent such a vast amount of sums of money on the trip to Dubai, it was the last thing that Celtic needed.
Yeah, I think it just shows you how weirdly treated football is being at the moment. Like how, you know, they always talk about like this sort of elite sport and, you know, they're in a privileged position and all that. It's actually quite mad that football is still going ahead at this time. Do you know, like, yes, as fans, we all want to watch football matches, and you know, I'm watching probably a lot more football at the moment than I would do normally because I'm not doing the other things that I normally do, like go to gigs all the time or work gigs.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you know, just seeing the way that football is still going ahead, it's just like, yes, I still want it, but not being able to go to the games is just such a huge factor in all this, and it almost makes it diluted the enjoyment of winning 9 in a row, and it's going to dilute the sort of, I think, the upset at losing the league. I think if everyone was in the same place and we were all going to the games and there was no coronavirus and we were in this position as well, 21 points behind, there would be absolute mayhem at games. Like the atmosphere at games would be poisonous, I think, because it would just be so shambolic. But I think the fact that they don't have fans at the games is probably a huge thing. And I've come onto that from talking about the way that football's treated differently. But it's just strange that we're continuing on with football while nobody else can do anything, but we can play football matches. It just seems a bit surreal.
But then that was part of what Peter Lawwell was saying in his interview yesterday, and a lot of people saying it's not an interview; it was sort of a forced chat. That's the way it did come across. You could see it was heavily edited. Anybody that's done any sort of editing before will see where the clips came in and out, and that's why I asked at the start of the programme. I'd love to know how long this interview was actually when Jerry McCulloch did it with Peter Lawwell and what it was cut down to. But one of the points that Peter Lawwell actually mentioned was that Celtic have been affected more than any other club through COVID, and I just don't buy that. I don't understand where he's coming from in that instance. And then he comes out and says that we'll come together, we'll fight together, and then the news breaks that the under-18s have now been put on furlough. Timing-wise, it was terrible for them, but it just shows again there is a bit of a disconnect between what is coming out from the statements from Celtic, what's coming out from Peter Lawwell, and what is actual fact.
Do you know what I think? I think he has a point in a sense, and this is where I'm going to have to be critical of Neil Lennon, is that we've been affected probably more by it because of the decisions that we made in the year prior to going into it. You know, I mean, in an ideal world, you know, we would still have Brendan Rodgers as manager, you know, and everyone would be happy, and, you know, we would all be singing about going for 10 in a row, and Brendan Rodgers is here for 10 in a row, but Brendan Rodgers jumped ship and left. But how would things be, right, if there hadn't been the sort of frisson between Law and Rodgers, and that led to, you know, Rodgers not getting players that he wanted, you know, considering a move to China, all of that. How would things be if they'd kept Rodgers in the place that he should have been? How would Rodgers have adapted to this environment and this situation? You know, you know, would players have been sold if they wanted to go? Yes, probably. You know, he would have insisted in it, I think. But instead, we kept players that didn't want to be there. Lennon said as much himself after the Ferencváros game, a game where we started with Ryan Christie up front. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's a huge game. And we always seem to go into these games having to play a player out of position or not having the right amount of players for a certain area of the park. And so I just think that we have been affected probably by the whole thing more than others, but we've put ourselves in a position where we've been so susceptible to it, and then we've made key decisions throughout the season that have led to we'd even not made the decisions. Volleyball and goalie made the decision to fly where he did and cause the games to be postponed. But we made the decision to fly to Dubai with Julian injured and risk that bubble being penetrated.
So we see a comment coming in here, and if you are watching us on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, do give the video a like, leave a comment in the section. It really helps us with YouTube's algorithm, and it gets the videos more views. We have just recently got over 7.4 thousand subscribers. We're targeting 10,000 by the end of the season. Be sure to share the podcast with your Celtic-minded friends. But the comment comes in here from 9th Legion. Everyone demanded an apology, so he apologises. Now that is also a problem. But then this then goes back to what Jeff comes in here to say is apology was mere lip service, damage was already done. Was it a case of Peter Lawwell was damned if he did and damned if he didn't in this situation?
I think so. I think the pressure was probably, I'd imagine it was mounting on Twitter for him to come out and say something. I saw a few comments on articles, basically saying there was a Celtic blog was basically saying there's still radio silence at Celtic Park, up until yesterday afternoon. So it was one of those where it was just like, yeah, he had to come out and say something. And I think the fact that they did an in-house interview, you're not going to. Well, obviously they're aware that Paul's been trying to get them on here, and not offering out this site as a platform, or this show as a platform. And so they've obviously thought, God, you know what? If a Celtic fan page, is basically saying we should do this, and all their followers and people commenting are going, yeah, they should do that, then they've obviously went, yeah, we should probably do that, eh? And then it's taken them till yesterday to actually, activate it.
So just seeing Paul coming in, just on the point you're making, Paul's actually sent a further request to Celtic's PR officer on Tuesday, requesting the exclusive interview with Lawwell. No response as of yet. We will keep everyone updated on that to see if we'll get him on. I believe when the charity weekender was going on, there was an offer of £10,000 to charity if Peter Lawwell would come on and do a one-off interview. Obviously, money wasn't a contributing factor, but it was very emphasis. It did put a lot of emphasis, on the fact that they have donated £1 million to charity over this coronavirus period. Now, yes, that is a fantastic achievement, especially when times are tough. A lot of people are on furlough. A lot of people have lost their jobs during this period. So the fact that you can donate this amount of money to charity and we can help those that are more vulnerable, that is the ethos of what Celtic were built on. And there was a question that was also asked in the interview when he was asked about comments from the media. And to be honest, listening to the question back, it sounds as if he was asked about the comments by Andy Walker on Sky Sports on Monday, when he said that it was against the club's ethos and against what the club stands for what they did. Lawwell comes out in defence and says that he doesn't believe that it was against the club's ethos, but that the landscape had changed from when the trip was approved on November. And he made the point to say that the trip was approved. He didn't then... He actually went back to that to say that it was approved. They said that it was organised and then made sure he made the point that it was approved. The landscape had changed. The Dubai was still on the list, but it still didn't make sense for the club to go. And he came out and said in hindsight that was the case. Surely even before that he knew it wasn't the case. And I think that Andy Walker was right. It is against the club's ethos that Celtic went away to Dubai, because we're spending this money. We're going to these world-class facilities, and now we're at the position where it's actually weakened our team. So go on and talk about all the charity, all that you want, but at the end of the day, the Celtic fans really care about the product that's going on the pitch as much as the charity money that's been raised.
See the 10 grand offer that was put in by our business for the interview. If Paul was able to get it, if you think about that, 10 grand's a hell of a lot of money, right? That could do a lot of good for a small charity, right? It would be a seismic impact. How much, if you look at a 10 grand in terms of the Dubai trip that's just happened, that's probably like, I don't know, 4 or 5 players' room service bills, for their time there. Do you know what I mean? That's what 10 grand is in Celtic world. Do you know what I mean? It's staggering to think of the disconnect now that there is at this point in time. And I know people will say, "Oh, well, you went to Dubai last year and nobody was complaining then." I've got a problem with going to somewhere like Dubai. Do you know what I mean? It just, for me, it seems like that I think maybe somebody's already used this analogy, but it's like the Rocky IV analogy, when like Dolph Lundgren is training in like high tech facilities, and he's got the best of everything, and then Rocky's just up a mountain, running up a mountain, screaming Adrian at the top of the mountain. It's a total Kevin Graham analogy. They'll always be one. But I just think it just makes me think of that. It just makes me think it's like unnecessary decadence going there. It's I don't think it's them showing off that they've got money. I don't think it's that. I just think it's kowtowing to like the modern day footballer, and kowtowing to these guys that are cutting about in Balenciaga gear. And where do people with Balenciaga gear want to go? They want to go to Dubai. And where do footballers want to go? They want to go to Dubai because they get to spend loads of money and shops on gear and all that. And I don't mean that sort of gear.
Got to be careful with that.
I'm not trying to create new controversy here. God's sake, please no. I already sort of slightly predicted the Beaton collapse against Rangers. So I don't want to predict any further narcotic stories about Celtic players. But it's just that's how I feel.
Paul Cockwell coming in with a comment here. Did you know that Billy McNeill was the manager after the defeat the Rangers and the Celtic players were supposed to go to Spain? Billy McNeill cancelled the trip and gave the money to a local school, and he's claiming that as a fact. Now, obviously, that's before my time. I don't know if you'd heard that story before, JP.
I did, and it was. I think it was Andy Walker, it was Andy Walker that said this in an article a few days ago, and he basically said that they got beat. And Billy McNeill sat them all down, all the senior members of the squad, like Paul McStay, Peter Grant and all that, and just basically said, we're not going. I can't remember where it was in Spain they were supposed to be going. He named the actual place. And then they just said, no, we're not going. And they, like he said, they donated the money. So Andy Walker's on record as saying that's fact. So a different world, a different era.
Definitely. And again, a big thank you to everyone who's joining us today. I can see there's over 1,000 people getting involved, which is fantastic. So if we take a look at the other topics that are coming out, let's take a look at the January transfer window. Now, we're 2 weeks into this January transfer window, and as of yet, there has been no strengthening of the squad. The team sits 21 points behind Rangers, and basically, we're in a position now where you're looking to see whether Peter Lawwell's point that we're still fighting and we still believe in the team is true. And if that's the case, then we know we need to strengthen the squad because the first half of the season hasn't been good enough. Or whether that the club has now written off this season and they're looking to plan for the future. And if that's the case, they'll be looking to bring in players ahead of the European qualifiers in the summer. But we're 2 weeks in and there's been nothing yet. The only discussion that I've seen so far is that Shane Duffy may be having his loan spell cancelled and that he may be going out on loan to Nottingham Forest. What would you make of that if that was to come true?
Well, see, to be honest, I didn't know that much about Shane Duffy before he signed for Celtic. I certainly didn't know that he once had a romantic relationship with Jordan, aka Katie Price. What that says about the man's character, I'll leave that up to other people's opinion. But I was obviously hopeful getting a proven English Premiership player coming in. Republic of Ireland captain. If you could have created a wish list of boxes to tick for Celtic fans, he would have ticked most of them. But I'm going to say he has been the biggest waste of money, pound for pound, as a centre half since Raphael Philippe Scheidt signed in the year 2000. And I remember that. And I remember watching him as a season ticket holder and the few games that he played. And then, you've got the famous Martin O'Neill comment where it was like, you remind me a lot of me. And then it was like, yeah, I'm 50 odd and I can still do everything that you can do. He just kind of looked at the ground and was like, oh, I'm done here. And you know, I just think, I don't know. We bought the guy, unfortunately, at the wrong point in his career, and you know he's come here with all the experience and everything else. But whatever's going on in his own life right now, if he's got any inner turmoil, being at the club that you support in a season when they're going for a historic 10th title in a row is not the place that you need to be. You know, it's as simple as that. You know, if we're being fed the line that there is issues, that, you know, or he's had issues. I know that he lost his father. I lost my dad 2 years ago. I'm still not over it. Do you know what I mean? It's not something that just goes in a couple of weeks. Do you know? So you don't know what's going on with his mental health. So I certainly wouldn't want to, you know, belittle him as a person. But looking at things factually, he's not been a good signing for Celtic. And if going somewhere else with a manager that he's worked with before, Chris Hughton, then, you know, perhaps that's the...
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm still listening to you. Sorry.
I don't know. You've just my screen's just disappeared. I don't know where it's gone.
I'm telling you, it's the ACSOM sniper. They're trying to take us out. Peter Lawwell's heard the discussion this morning, and he doesn't want to hear any more of it. But no, the point you're making on Shane Duffy's spot on. But the question I would ask is, when you look at it, we're now at the position where we only, once the players return back from their isolation period, we're left with only one recognised centre-half in Christopher Ajer. Chris Julian is out for 4 months. Stephen Welsh, who I actually thought played really well against the Hibs at the weekend, but it's a person who's only made 3 league appearances for Celtic. And one of them was last season, one was against Rangers in the derby, and the other one was on Monday night. So it's a lot to throw into someone that hasn't played a lot of games. So then you're left with only 2 centre-halves. It has to be a position that we're looking to strengthen in this transfer window, because if we get one more injury, then who do we turn to? Have we got to go to the reserves? Is there someone that's coming through there? It just seems to be an incredible situation that we find ourselves in.
Well, it does, and I guess it goes back to, you know, everybody thought that the recruitment was good in the summer, and the players that we brought in, Laxalt, you know, international keeper in Barricades, Duffy, retaining El Yunusi. I think, you know, everybody thought that, but then see, to be going into that game against Rangers a couple of weeks ago, you know, when I was on with Kev 2 days before, and I said I'm not comfortable with Nir Bitton playing centre half. I said, look at what he did last night. Makes that shove in the box, needless shove. You know, the guy's going nowhere. Nearly gives away a penalty, and in another game, that's a penalty. And then, you know, to be going into a game of that magnitude, having to play Nir Bitton at centre half when you've got Shane Duffy on the bench, who clearly was fit because he came on. So, like, that's just an absolute catastrophe of a signing policy to certainly to not have anybody, you know, in reserve. You know, it's absolutely mental, especially when you look at the other side of the city and what they've got to pull from, and they just sort of seem to slot players in and out there and seamlessly, and there's never any, you know, emergency people playing in emergency positions. It doesn't seem to be that way anyway, whereas we are riddled with it. You know, it's just like constantly square pegs and round holes. So Duffy, if he was to go, you know, I don't think there's not going to be a sort of big outpouring of grief at him leaving. Do you know what I mean? It'll just be like, oh, that didn't work. It was an interesting few months. See you later. You know.
And there's been a stat that's come out in recent days that talks about the amount of goals that we've conceded from set pieces. And what you could see at the set pieces on Monday night is you could see Stephen Welsh directing Diego Laxalt where to stand, and he was trying to command the area, which was great to see from someone that has doesn't have a lot of experience. So that shows that there is a player in there. But again, if we get one more injury, you're then back to playing Nir Bitton at centre half. And after that performance against Rangers, it's not a position that you want to put him into. No. We shouldn't be in the position where you're playing central midfielders in a centre half position. So if you look at it, we're going to be 3 or 4 months without Christopher Julian. You've got Christopher Ajer, and then what? You've bought the boy Welsh. We really need to strengthen in that position. We can't go to play the three at the back that Neil Lennon loves to play because you don't have three centre defenders. Even if you play two at the back, we're one injury away from being back in a crisis. It just seems a ridiculous position to be in. And with 2 weeks of the window still to go, we haven't even been linked with anyone yet. I mean, we were linked with Benkovic. He decided to go to Livingston over Celtic. So what happens now?
I read that Nicky Hammond was watching Declan Gallagher. I read an article that may or may not have been fact, but it said that Declan Gallagher was watching. Nicky Hammond was watching Declan Gallagher at a Motherwell game within the last 2 weeks. So it would obviously, maybe it would have been at the weekend. I don't know. I can't remember where I read it, but it definitely said that he was watched anyway. I mean, obviously they'll have been able to ask Turnbull about Declan Gallagher and his his mentality and training and how he is in the dressing room and all the rest of it. So they'll have got close-hand information from Turnbull. I've seen a lot of people bring up his slightly checkered past. Are you aware of that? Are you aware?
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't have let that stand in the way of making him a signing. If he's deemed good enough to be a signing in this short term, I haven't seen enough of him to comment. He looked decent against us. He obviously took his goal well. He's been in and around the Scotland setup. He played in that Serbia game and did well, I thought. I wouldn't want to be signing a guy on one Scotland international game or a half decent performance against us, because we've made signings like that before and they've not done anywhere near as good as they should or expected to do. So I think the Declan Gallagher one's the only person that's been linked that I can tell, but maybe we've got a rabbit to pull out of a hat. But Lennon's gone on record and said that we need to sign a centre half, and we will be looking to sign. So whether that's a loan signing, because ultimately I think, why would we go out and shell out 5, 6, 7 million on a centre half at this stage? It just seems it hardly ever happens in January, does it? You don't see signings of that nature happen, really, because anybody would be wanting to hang on to somebody like that in January rather than sell them. And they'd be like, well, if we could sell them for 6, 7 million now, we can sell them for 6, 7 million in the summer.
So if you take a look at it with the Declan Gallagher thing, I think there's only 6 months left on his contract at Motherwell. He's about to turn 30 next month. He did come through the Celtic Youth Academy, and as you said, he has had a bit of a checkered past before. That seemed to turn round when he went to Livingston, and he ended up making the Scottish national team. But for me, I just think that's a papering over the cracks with someone like Declan Gallagher. You take a look at Motherwell this season, and they're sitting second from bottom. So that would never instill confidence in me that you bring in a centre half who's playing in a team that are fighting relegation this season, no matter how good they would be. To me, it looks as if it's like someone like when we brought in Scott Bain. Scott Bain was brought in as a third choice goalkeeper. He went on loan to Hibs, never played a game. He was barely playing for Dundee because of his fallout with Neil McCann. And then we're trying to bring someone in, and he turns in to be our number one goalkeeper through injury and through suspension. For me, I think Stephen Welsh is a better defender than Declan Gallagher. And if we're trying to plan for the future, which we should be doing now, then he shouldn't be part of the plans if you're going to do that. We should be looking at other players, younger players, who we can turn into potential Celtic players of the future. A lot of people coming in and saying Ryan Porteous at Hibs. What would your take be on him?
Well, I like his tenacity, and he is up for a fight. I had a recent sort of stushy with a friend of mine who's a Hibs fan who just out of nowhere decided to unleash all this abuse at me, just basically slagging Celtic off, calling Celtic, they're just sort of, the league bullies who just go out and buy players off other clubs, and look at all the players you've taken off Hibs over the years. And I had to concede on a few from Hibs. There was the Chris Killen, for example. That was probably a needless signing. Maybe to slightly less of an extent Ulrich Larsson, although Ulrich Larsson did play in some big games for Celtic. And what Didi Agat, who we that was their fault. They didn't put him down on a long-term deal, and we just took advantage of a situation and went in and paid 30 grand for him, or 50 grand, or whatever it was. So if we were to go in and get Porteous, arguably one of their best players, I think I would be expecting a message from my pal Ryan imminently, because they would be raging. But I certainly, from what I've seen of Porteous against us, I do like him. I like his sort of he's very committed. You know, you've seen that against that other team, and likes a tackle. Highly rated, I think. You might be able to tell me differently, but I wouldn't be. I'd rather we went for someone like Ryan Porteous, but that would involve spending money, surely, because we were not going to go into Hibs and lowball them again, or are we? I don't know.
That would be an interesting one, as Peter Lawwell tries to speak with the Hibs chairman to try and get that. I mean, this is the kind of situation we find ourselves in now, and it's as much to do with Celtic's doing as it is to do with the situations that are out with Celtic's control. For example, with the Brexit, what's happened there, it makes it more difficult for Celtic to sign players from foreign countries. They have to be of a certain standard now to get them in. We can't go out and try and bring in someone that we think will be a talent in a year to 2 years' time. Someone like, I'm trying to think the best example of recent times, is Ismaila Soro wouldn't be able to sign for Celtic now because he doesn't have the international experience. Mm-hmm. So the way that Celtic do their transfers are going to have to change. And I wouldn't be surprised that we do start looking at players from the Scottish Premiership teams, or also from the Championship down south. I know we've been linked with Ben Davies from Preston, and some other deals that we were linked with, such as Alfie Daughtry from Charlton. It looks as if that one's not going to go through. We've also been linked with Wigan striker Kyle Jones over the last couple of days. It is going to be the way that we go forward, and I think for Celtic, this is the end of an era. This is the time to rebuild, regardless of whether Celtic win 10 in a row or they don't win 10 in a row. And to me, that is more likely to be the latter. We have to rebuild. There's going to be a lot of players that look to move on after this season. And it's the start of a new era at Celtic. So I think if you can start making the plans now, start looking at the players that are available on pre-contracts for January, then it's something that we should be doing. But we also have to see ourselves through the rest of this season. And we also have to look at the team that we've got at the minute. And for the games that's coming up, you don't want to be in a position where Near Beaton's at centre-half in that game. So we do have to strengthen between now and the rest of the season as well.
I would be more inclined to agree and say I would rather see Welsh kept in and around the team, or, you know, even starting, over just going out and getting someone randomly, you know, a random centre-half signing that's, you know, not being scouted properly, because let's face it, we can't really put our trust in whether or not they've scouted anybody, because up until a week or two ago, they probably weren't looking to get a centre-half, you know, when all of a sudden we need a centre-half. So if all of a sudden you need a centre-half, is it just a scattergun approach where you're just like, oh, what about him, or what about him, what about him, rather than like a measured, you know, a measured scenario where someone's been profiled and, you know, everyone's all on board with their hands up going, yeah, I think we should sign this guy, rather than like, I don't know about him, you know. So I'd rather, you know, if we're to go and get one centre half in, and then you know, I think Paul mentioned it. I felt sorry for Welsh when I actually never thought about it. You know, sometimes you don't think about football players and their lives, and like, you know, sometimes you just think about them as being like that guy you've seen play for Celtic, and then you don't really think about what happens after that. But the fact that Welsh was just completely bombed out of the squad after the Milan game, as soon as we had our sort of quota of centre halves back, Welsh wasn't even really featured on the bench. I don't think. I don't know. I don't know why, but it just seems a bit, you know, it seems a bit unfair, really, that you come in and it's not. I don't think you could blame him for any glaring errors or mistakes. You know, I think he did all right when he came in, and certainly with a centre half, you need to, you know, keep giving them opportunities to allow their confidence to grow, rather than just be like, oh, I got in for a couple of games and I've not seen any action then for months. You know.
Yeah. And especially with the fact that we can make the 5 substitutions this year.
Yeah.
So you can give the young players a chance. Obviously, we've not been in the position where we've comfortably been winning games for a period of time. A lot of the results that we have won have been pretty close games. So we haven't been able to do it. But what we saw is when we brought in guys like Ismail Assoro and we brought in guys like David Turnbull, the kind of the spine of the team changed. And the emphasis was more on the attacking side of the game, and it was quicker build-up play. Some of the stuff that David Turnbull has done this season has been absolutely incredible. His passing range, his link-up play has been outstanding, and he is one that will certainly be there for the future at Celtic. And if I'm being honest, if we look at the rebuild job that needs to be done in the summer, I think that you've got a kind of core there of Ismail Assoro, Callum McGregor, and David Turnbull, and from that you have to build the rest of the team around it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think even when he stepped up to take that free kick on Monday, I knew he was going to score. I absolutely knew he was going to score. There was no doubt in my mind. I thought, right, this is absolute last chance saloon here, pretty much for us. And if there was anybody on that park that I thought was going to actually deliver, when you look at his strike rate in the last, month or something, or month and a half since he's come into the team, he's got a fair amount of goals. I don't know how many, is it 4 or 5 goals he's got? And
I think he's got 5 goals in 6 games or something like that. It's an incredible return.
Yeah, and on another day, he might have got one at Ibrox as well. Do you know? It's just, I think if things had gone different in that first half, it would have been a completely different game. That's all ifs, buts, and maybes, I know, but I was certainly confident with him going into that game and the way he was playing, and I think it's amazing to see someone just suddenly come into the team and then make a jersey his own. Do you know, like it's been a while since we've seen anybody do that. Certainly in the Celtic midfield, which has been almost sort of locked shut, in terms of who gets a game in the midfield. It's just been like, oh well, it's Brown, it's McGregor, it's and Cham. Like there's not been anybody really able to sort of get into that mix. Whereas he's just come in and went like, out of the way, I can do this, and he's proven it. He's really, really impressed me.
So just a point on what you made there. So we'll take a look back at the Hibs game and we'll take a look forward to the Livingston game on Saturday, just to round off today's show. Watching the game on Monday night, were you impressed with the players that came in to make their kind of debuts? Cameron Harper was someone that made his first team debut. I was also reading that he only has 6 months left on his contract, but Celtic have offered him a new deal. So one to keep an eye on there. But guys that came into the squad like Henderson, like Okoflex, like Dembele, were you impressed with some of the performances on Monday night?
I wouldn't say there was anybody really that sort of stood out and made me go, oh. I mean, I did think Welsh marshalled the back, like you said. It was good to see him being sort of vocal and whatnot. I wouldn't say I was just impressed with the fact that we were able to put together a performance. Like when a team's thrown together like that, missing so many big players, and these guys, and I know that there was no fans there, so that makes it maybe not as daunting a task as to go, like, because if there'd been 60,000 fans there on Monday night and we were in this same position, I mean, arguably if there was fans there, I don't think we would be in this same position. That's another argument. But if we were going into that game with 60,000 fans there, with the pressure in that game, and it was that team, I would have feared for them, because it would have been a huge, huge weight on their shoulders. Whereas maybe the fact that there wasn't fans, they were able to just go, right, we kind of know what we're doing here. Let's see how we get on. And we were going up against a Hibs team that are really a decent Hibs team that probably should have got a result at Ibrox a few weeks ago. I watched that game. They definitely deserved a point in that game. Rangers nicked the 1-0, and I think Gerrard even said after the game that was a tough test. We're happy to get the win. We maybe rode our luck a bit. So we've gone and played that team with a complete shadow side, an absolute shadow side. And managed. They took it to like the 80 odd minute to nearly win it. And I don't think anybody would have argued if we'd won the game with that free kick from Turnbull. naivety at the back. The free kick, Laxalt, the free kick is just like, oh.
Yep.
It's just up there with Christie's against Milan. It's just absolute needless. You know, and you wonder, would Taylor have made that same mistake? I know it's horses for courses, but I don't think he would have. I think he's more defensively sound than Laxalt, and Laxalt's maybe tired. I don't know, but a terrible free kick to give away at that time in the game as well. Just to expose us is just
Just looking at the two goals then in isolation. So obviously David Turnbull's free kick was a fantastic bit of skill. What I was saying when I was watching the game was I felt the goalkeeper gave him so much of the goal to target that it was his only option was to take the pop for where he put it. But to get the technique to get up and over the wall and back down was outstanding. Taking a look at the Hibs goal, as you said, I don't think there was definitely no need for Diego Laxalt to give away that foul. It was poor, but I thought his positioning throughout the whole game was pretty poor as well. There was a lot of times where he didn't really know who to mark. He could have stopped the crosses from coming in, but he wasn't in the right positions. And then it was just a calamity of errors for that. Connor Hazard, who I actually thought had a very good game up until that point. He was coming out, he was collecting crosses, he made a couple of really good saves. He'd probably made more saves than some of the other goalkeepers have made this season, as seems to be the point coming across from the Celtic fans.
That's true.
But then he comes out and he kind of makes a similar error to what he did in the Scottish Cup final. And then the ball kind of falls to the defence. Shane Duffy makes a kind of skiff at clearing it, and in goes the goal from Kevin Nisbet. And it just kind of summed up Celtic's season so far as to where the gap came from, where the goal came from.
Yeah, it did, and it was. I mean, if anybody was clinging on to any slim hope, I think it vanished at that point with that equaliser. But I mean, yeah, the damage has been done, and it's been drip fed, the damage, rather than just like one calamitous moment or anything like that. It's just been like a sort of drip fed over the season. But did you know, I did look back at the Ferencvaros squad, and Harper was on the bench in that game. Cameron Harper, final in the bench in that game. So that just shows you, even at that stage of the season, how stretched we were. We were putting like Harper on the bench because we didn't have anybody else. We had Klimala as well, I think, but obviously we were starting with Christie in that game. So, but that's an aside. I think it did sum up everything, but it summed up everything in the fact that we were having to play that team to contest that game. It was just like, this is absolutely farcical that we have found ourselves in this position. It's beyond anything I think anybody could have expected. I think so many people are just give Klopp his own show.
You're going down really well in the comments today, PJ.
I think it's just a sad indictment of where we are and how we've really badly negotiated this pandemic. You know, some people have probably dealt with this individually better than others in terms of what they've done and how they've used their time. Celtic have dealt with it horrendously bad, you know, and you know, we've just kept finding more bullets to shoot ourselves in the foot with. You know, it's like we started off with 2, used them, and then just, you know, repeatedly shot ourselves in the foot. And it's gutting, but at the same time, I don't feel as invested in it as I normally do because I'm not at the games. See, not being at the games, I don't feel as invested as I would do. If this was all happening at the games, oh my God, this would be this times a million for me. But it's not. So.
Yeah, I totally get that. I was talking to Paul Mitchell from the BBC yesterday on the Football Insomniac podcast, which anyone can catch on A State of Mind's YouTube after this. And we were talking about the saturation of football at the minute. I mean, even last night in England, I think there was 2 or 3 games, one after the other. It just gets to a point where you feel, I could just miss that game. I'll see the highlights later. I'm not that fussed. I'm not that into it. So, yeah, it is. And if you were at the games and we were going to Celtic Park week in and week out, I think I don't think Neil Lennon would still be in a job.
No,
for one.
He wouldn't. 100%.
And I'd like to think that we'd be in a better position than what we are. I think this season and the fact that fans haven't been there has allowed a lot of stagnation behind the scenes. So it'll be quite interesting. But looking ahead to the game against Livingston at the weekend, obviously this will be the last time you're on before the Livingston game. What are you looking forward to? Do you think there'll be many changes in the team ahead of that game?
I don't think so. No, I think he probably saw enough from that side on Monday. By the way, but see the whole AirPod thing. What was said about that? Was it claimed that Neil Lennon was talking to players on their phones through their AirPods? Was that what the reason was given?
That was meant to be the case, yeah.
Right. Okay, that's interesting because I did see something pop up on a Celtic page saying, it was one of these clickbait news stories basically saying why did Armstrong Okoflex have an AirPod in when he was on the bench? Was he just sitting listening to tunes while the game was going on? That would be absolutely mental if that was happening. I think that would put El Yunusi's wee swatch at the score on his phone to that to
another level.
Aye. But if that has been cited as the reason, then fair enough. But I think he probably saw enough from that side to think that they were capable of another performance. I was pretty terrified about Monday night, to be honest. I was thinking we could be on the wrong end of a bit of a shoe-in, really. I mean, I thought Hibs would have maybe sensed a bit of blood and gone for it a bit more. But they didn't, and I'm quite glad they didn't. But Livingston are obviously on a good run. I don't know what their stats are, but I know that they've been on a fairly decent winning run. Did they win against Ross County the other day? What was the final score?
I think they've won 3 or 4 in a row. They're on a really good run. They obviously were meant to play Aberdeen last night, and the game got called off because of a waterlogged plastic pitch, which is quite funny.
Yeah.
Kevin Graham coming in saying that Okoflex was listening to some Little Mix. Nothing wrong with that. But ahead of the game on Saturday, then what would you see? What is your prediction for the score at the weekend?
Oh God! I mean, I'm never one for predictions. I predicted 2-1 Celtic in the Ibrox game when I was last on, and obviously got that spectacularly wrong. But I wasn't allowing for absolutely insane defending by Near Beaton. So I should have probably factored that into my thinking. So I should factor in potentially insane defending. They've won 7 on the bounce. Jerry Mesh.
Going to be a difficult game.
Yeah, I think on Saturday I certainly we will concede a goal. I know that. I would put money on that right now. Little Mick, how has this happened? Your fault. Livingston a different prospect, and they definitely will score. So I'm going to say, it's a very hopeful punt in the 2-1 category of results. I just hope we can, because it's just like for those guys as well. I think it would have been hard to take for them walking in, having suffered. What would they probably felt like a defeat, that goal right at the death. And if it is the same team, hopefully they've got the bit between their teeth on Saturday to be like, right, okay, we made a bit of a mess at the end of that game on Monday. Let's not do it again. We know the mistakes we cannot do in this game. So you'd like to think that was like maybe a bit of a lesson for them, because they've not been able to learn in any other games, have they? It's not. A lot of these guys are just fledgling Celtic players. It's not as if they've got experience of victories or experience of defeats. They've got neither. they've just got to go in as they are. So that's some of their only experience, and it's certainly their most recent experience of playing for Celtic. And I'd like to think that they could maybe take that experience into Saturday and get us through these 2 games, and just put it down to experience and move on and get the real quote unquote Celtic back for our next game.
And it is a game that we will be covering here live on A Celtic State of Mind. We'll be here 30 minutes before kick-off. We'll do the halftime analysis, and then we'll be there for 30 minutes after the game. We'll have Paul back. A lot of people saying he's going for a haircut. I don't know what's going on there. But maybe you'll be able to see what Paul has been up to in over the last couple of hours in the not too distant future. But for today, I'd just like to thank JP, or the Pound Shop Jurgen Klopp, as he's now been called. It's been a it's been a pleasure having you on, and it's been a pleasure hosting today. Thank you to everyone in the comments. Please make sure to like, to subscribe, and to give us your feedback. We will be back tomorrow at 12:30 with the ACSOM Daily Bulletin. But until then, everyone, stay safe and hail, hail.
Cheers.